Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll wait a few more minutes and wait for everybody to join before we begin the session. A very good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the NASTech 2022 Techpathshala by FutureSkills Prime. FutureSkills Prime is a joint initiative of Ministry of Information Technology and Electronics and Nasscom. My name is Amrita from Team Nasscom and would like to welcome all of you today to an amazing session of learning and opening our minds. Please do make sure to make use of the Q&A section to ask your questions, and we will get to you during the session. We are starting the day on a high with Blockchain for Beginners with Raghuveer Subhodha, who is the Senior Vice President Technology at Virtusa, responsible for digital engineering and emerging technologies. Raghuveer has over 22 years of global experience as a trusted and strategic business advisor and global practice leader. Currently, he is with Virtusa Consulting Services as a global practice head, managing two portfolios of application platform engineering, along with enterprise architecture with cloud native and cloud first approaches. The role involves managing a very large team of employees all over the world, and the Virtusa in Design is the new go-to-market solutions and themes accelerator for a faster development and delivery. As a technologist, Raghuveer is especially passionate about spreading the word about tech as a means to transform lives and businesses. Thank you for joining us today, Raghuveer. Over to you.
Thank you, Amrita. Good morning, everyone. Just to confirm, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you okay. And I missed one more point. We have quite a few people who have joined us on YouTube as well. Welcome, everybody. If you have any comments, please make use of the comment section.
Thank you. So, shall I go ahead, Amrita?
Please do, please.
Okay. One last time, please confirm if you're able to see my screen.
I can see your screen. It's perfect. Thank you.
All right. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NASTech Techpathshala. Without any further introductions, the topic that I thought that I will share with you today is on the blockchain. And when we hear the term blockchain, there are many things that come to our mind. Right? Blockchain is Bitcoin. Blockchain is blockchain is about encryption. Blockchain is about authentication. It's only used for record keeping, etc. Right? I thought it is important for us to drive a particular notion about understanding what blockchain is. And today's session, given the topic is blockchain for beginners, I'm going to stick to only around blockchain itself. I am not going to talk about cryptocurrencies. I'm not going to talk about Bitcoins, so on and so forth. While I talk about a few things on a distributed ledger and all that, we will just get that in a minute. But if you're thinking about those elements, probably we can work on a different session to understand more about that. This session is only from a blockchain standpoint. Now, to set the baseline, what blockchain really means or really made up of, right? It's essentially the three ways and the three, the common, the loosely used terms, if I can mention here, that blockchain as a Bitcoin currency. We must understand that while cryptocurrencies are derivatives of blockchain, but do not link blockchain and Bitcoin together as one and the same. It's also important to understand what the specific blockchain that is being used and the ideas around the blockchain in general. So these three elements at the highest level should really either make up exact meaning of how a blockchain interpretation can be. Having said that, I felt it's also an important element to understand what is a blockchain and what is a Bitcoin. And I felt this particular chart kind of gives us a fundamental or a foundational thinking on the blockchain itself, right? As you can imagine, like I said, Bitcoin is not blockchain. The way you can read this slide is it starts with a type of a technology. In this case, now we will talk about DLT or distributed ledger technology. We're going to use a term called blockchain as a technology medium only. And out of that, we end up creating what is called as an application, in this case, Bitcoin. So we use Bitcoins in many different scenarios, whether it is for purchasing for something on a virtual world, so on and so forth. So we end up trading Bitcoins like that, right? That essentially should set the stepping stone for understanding blockchain. Now, having said that, I felt, when I was thinking about how do I, for a beginner, a beginner version of defining a blockchain, I felt this definition comes closely to what we can all imagine, and this is something that we can kind of harness within ourselves, not to have getting confused between the worlds of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and all that. When somebody asks you at the foundation level what a blockchain is, you can first tell them that it's a way of keeping the records of the transactions in blocks. That's number one. Number two, these blocks, in other words, chain of blocks, are stored cryptographically in the chronological order which the events occur. Third, this allows the entries that are made. I'll come to that ledger part in a bit. These entries that are made as a part of the chains or the blocks that you will see can be accessed from different servers, which means to say that in a traditional, in a conventional world, we are so very used of a term called centralize the record keeping, centralize the access, so on and so forth. The primary intent of blockchain is towards making sure that the very fundamental aspect of centralization is moved away, and then it is made as decentralized. So you will see that more in the next few slides. Now, to sum it up, blockchain is a record-keeping way, or is a way of record-keeping in the form of chains, which are kept in a chronological sequence that allows to be accessed from different servers. Now, why blockchain? Right now, this is a very interesting question that we also keep getting when we talk to our customers also. Care must be taken here that not every use case, not every solution, not every requirement should be done on blockchain. We must understand why we have to use blockchain and why not in some similar, and the why not question of why not use a database to solve a solution, that must be answered first before you could answer why somebody has to use a blockchain. Now, there could be many definitions or many derivatives of why somebody should use blockchain. At the highest level, no matter how many variations are there to the definition, you will see these four things at the core level itself, which is from an efficiency standpoint, from a transparency, trust, and resilience, right? Some of it can also be accomplished using database technologies. When you're building applications, etc., you can continue to use databases, but there are limitations, but there are transparency related issues, trust related issues, so on and so forth, that in one form or the other can negate to why a blockchain and why not a database. Having said that, from an efficiency standpoint, in a simple blockchain, the way it works is if this then that, right? It's all about your if conditions. It's all about if this is the scenario, then do this. It's a typical way of how we are all used about conditional statements that we use. One of the core elements of blockchain from an efficiency standpoint is the usage of what we call as smart contracts, right? I'll come to that in a future slide, but then this helps build a lot of efficiency, and a lot of security is built from an efficiency standpoint as well. It is not looked as two different things when you are working with a blockchain. Transparency is the next term or the core of why blockchain. Even though traditional systems allows you to dip into the database, find out the information that you would want, getting a real-time access is a paramount importance of how the future of application development is going to look like, right? Today, the way we are all so very used is about having these information passed on as a part of the reports that get generated. So it is always one step behind in terms of the transparency. At real time, that's the blockchain technology helps us to gain transparency. That's the second one. Third one, trust, is an important definition, if you will. Now, trust has many, like I said, many different definitions also. If you were to look at trust as the way of securing your information, it can be termed as a trust, because I believe in somebody who has secured my data, right? I believe somebody, for example, if I'm using an online banking, right? I believe that the banks and the banking portals and the platform, that they are very secure enough. So I'm started to build my trust on that. We all are aware, at least some of us are aware about the past 2 years, about the greatest fiasco around how Google takes our data and interprets in the way, or in some cases, some of the allegations that were made about selling the data to advertisers, etc. In a similar way, Facebook also gotten into the same similar fiasco. Now, there started the foundations getting shaken, right? The very core systems which used to be our part and parcel of our life, even today, we kind of reach out to Google for everything, for every information, right? Ask Google for what is blockchain, till ask Google, how do I cook something, right? So Google starts giving that. So we have built, unnoticingly, we have built a lot of trust in these platforms. And when this classic fiasco that has happened, the trust element got shaken. And that's where, one of these main important criteria of blockchain is about, in the sense that people who converge on blockchain have the ability to approve. So you exactly know who in the chain is approving and who is not, and thereby the records are safe. And that's how the trust system is built. So you are not going to have a third party monitoring your trust, security, blah, etc. Right? So that's about the trust part. Resilience, resilience is um, one of the other core aspects of a blockchain technology. Now, the easier said than done is about the more number of participants converge onto a blockchain, the better or the robust the data is, right? Which means that as and more people start getting onto the blockchain and getting onto the blockchain technology, those number of approvers, who are there onto the system helps make the system more secure, being more transparent, and thereby the resilience kicks in. That, in essence, is why a blockchain or how a blockchain can revolutionize the technology. That starts with efficiency, transparency, trust, and resilience. Now, I started off my talk telling that, once we hear the term blockchain, we immediately think of Bitcoins and other things and all that. However, I'm sure, those who have done research about blockchain, those who probably even are intermediate to advanced level of knowledge on blockchain technology, these are some of the things that, we would have encountered in our lives in one way or the other, right? Which means when we think of blockchain, we think that there is only one blockchain and that's about it. So that there is a singular way of looking at blockchain. And when I move to the variants of blockchain, you will soon start realizing that these are no longer than myths about it, right? So as we progress along the next few slides, keep these things or the myths in your mind. Of course, if you have more than this, fantastic. I just thought as a part of this session, these are some of the things that, I could come up with, that, we all could easily relate. The second one is the idea about blockchains is that, we use it only for financial transactions or in the form of currencies only, which I talked about, like a Bitcoin, right? Very soon, when we go into some of the use cases, you will see, how blockchain is more not just about transactions which are financial in nature, but how we can use the technology in other use cases as well. Like I said, blockchain and Bitcoin are read as the same thing, right? It is not. I talked about in my previous slide. One of the core things that, even though we talked about blockchain, the trust part, the efficiency part, the transparency, etc., somehow we get fixated that blockchain is a means to fix fraudulent transactions. So in essence, it can definitely fix. I'm not saying that blockchain is not for fixing the fraud. It does fix. However, it is not about only for fixing the fraud. That's how we should read it, right? Blockchains are immutable is another thing. We keep hearing this term, in every, either a textbook or a video or any learning material that we go after. Blockchains are immutable. Now, I choose to say it this way. Blockchains, in a sense, can be mutable. Bear with me on this. Can be mutable, but it's a very arduous and it's a very cumbersome process, and it involves a lot of effort for somebody to kind of change what has been recorded in the blockchain. Essentially asking if somebody is going to manipulate the data, it has to actually go through the same consensus, etc. So it's more costlier affair than just a simple way of record keeping. So in a sense, blockchains are immutable, right? Then the moment we hear blockchains and the blockchain technology, we think that the technology is out there. We talk about Ethereum, we talk about MetaMask and everything. We think about, oh, these are all available here, and then yeah, it must be so that the solutions that we build, are economically viable. While some of it is true, some of it, like I said, for example, to update a record on blockchain, it becomes a very costly or it's not an economically viable solution. So that's something that you should keep in mind. Lastly, like I said, there could be more, but lastly, when we hear, even though the market trend is like that, we are yet to see probably a day-to-day use cases running on blockchains. We may not be privy to most of it, but then in a future slide, you will see how some government institutions have leveraged blockchain in their day-to-day transactions. So it need not be only the large enterprises or the large bodies, who can or who are implementing. However, any technology has its own path of an adoption curve. I'm sure, in about a year to come, we will see a lot many use cases coming through, and thereby, you will see the more day-to-day use cases can be running on blockchain. Even so much so that the government of India is also thinking about baselining their next generation of digital platform to be powered by blockchain. There is a lot of evaluation that is going on. There is a lot of discussions that are going on, etc. The technology has to be viable. The technology should not be implemented in a way that it becomes a hurdle for end users to use, so on and so forth. So I'm sure, in the days and months to come, we will start becoming the beneficiaries of these technologies. Of course, there is always a way with which, we can always contribute back. But then, having said that, these are some of these strides which a lot of other industries are also making. Now, some of the key features, though I touched upon it in a very high level, I felt these are some 6 different terminologies that, as a blockchain enthusiast or a blockchain beginner, you must understand. And some of these, we will go a little bit more in detail in the next slides. At the highest level, the 6 aspects is from what is being distributed, what do we mean by consensus. I talked about immutability. We also touch upon autonomous. I talked about transparency, also talk about tokenization. 6 different things that all of us should keep in mind. I may not touch upon all 6, or I may reference some of these different terminologies in a different slide, but in a sense, each one of these, you will see how they are an important feature of a blockchain technology. Distributed is something that in which the records are shared across different participants, which allows it to be the data being with different parties. Now, when it is with different parties, it becomes equally important that each one of them have the responsibility of viewing and approving those transactions. That's distributed. Consensus is, for example, it's just about agreeing, right? In a simple terms, right? If I, like I said, if I agree to a particular transaction, I can always go and then say that I can validate the transaction and I agree to it. There is a case where, you can disagree. There is a case where, you can stay neutral. All of that is applicable. But essentially, the more number of consensus that we drive to validate the transactions, make the distributed ledger technology all the more relevant, all the more effective, all the more resilient. So that's consensus. I talked about immutability in greater detail. Essentially, is to make sure that, one, unnecessarily nobody deletes the record, In fact, there is no way that you can delete a record, another transaction just gets added into the chain. Like I said, of course, there are records that we can modify that. However, like I said, modify requires quite a much. It's an expensive proposition there. An easy example that I can give here is, imagine you are writing on a piece of paper with an ink pen, right? You've started writing, and then you suddenly realize that some of the previous statement you have to change that, right? It's a very difficult process, right? You have to go now, to either use some whitener or something and then write on top of that, etc. It's a very cumbersome. It's a very it's not a very neat way of doing it. But of course, job gets done, right? So that essentially is immutability. Autonomous is where there is a self-execute way of streamlining the processes and operations. In which way you can use some of these smart contracts as a part of being autonomous and helps build or helps adhere to the processes that are established there. That's about being autonomous. We talked about transparency. Transparency is not just being transparent in a public or a private way. It must also be backed by how well these records are protected also, right? So that drives the foundations for transparency. It could mean that an anonymous user can always have an access to the record, but probably in a view-only fashion. He or she may not be able to come in and then do anything about it. So it allows in an open way. That's how the technologies, including when we talk about Web3 and all, Web3, one of the core aspects is about building in an open way, which means you are going to use open source technologies, you are going to use more of transparency there, so on and so forth. So these are all essentially powered by the blockchain technology, and underlying feature being transparency there. The tokenization is all about each of the assets or the references that are there is tokenized, which means you now use tokens as a means of exchanging between two entities, right? Now, whether in a conventional world, we share data between two different parties using, let's just say, a key, right, or a certificate. In a similar way, we are going to use tokens here, which is probably I can safely say this, impossible to fake a token. Even a fake token that is getting used to track something also gets recorded into the chain. So thereby, you are not simply going to use this for the sake of using. Thereby, the others who jump onto the chain, they start validating or not validating, and then hence prove a transaction being authentic. This I talked about those 6 terminologies there. Let's just get into some of these in a little more detail. Transactions, like I talked about, is essentially around giving the proof of history, right? Which means who was the earliest or what transaction was recorded at the earliest, and then you build a sequence of events associated in that chain. Now, there are, like I said, there are fantastic implementations that have been already done leveraging the blockchain technology. If you go to Google and then find out, what others are doing, you will find hundreds of use cases where, you can see blockchain technology being used. I picked a handful of use cases here. One of the most sought after implementation is the government of Estonia, right? All of their government record keeping is now based on blockchain technology, which means if you are going to get your driver's license, if you are going to get your personal identification numbers, you are going to get your social security cards, registration of birth, registration of lands, all of that is completely powered through the blockchain technology. Similarly, you will see a video in just a bit how food distribution and how some of the pioneers in blockchain technology have used that technology to give the power back to the consumers, right? So something that we will see in a short while. Audits, right? Audits is another classic case where the auditors today have really backtracked to the documents in a very manual way, right? It is time consuming. Now that is where the use case around how blockchain technology can be used to ensure that the audits that happen are more on an autonomous basis. There is no way of manually stepping in to prove a particular point. You have a proof of history in the entire chain of transaction. Thereby, the way the audit happens would fundamentally change as well. I talked about land registrations as a part of Estonia's Estonia government implementation. There are many other governments that are also looking at. One of the important implementation that I was also fascinated was in a supply chain scenario. The parties who come into in an end-to-end supply chain scenario, whether it is tracking, whether it is the origin of goods and equipment that come until it goes through a shipping, then goes through into the landing zone and to the end consumers, all are tracked through a blockchain technology. So these are some of the use cases and the blockchain as a technology that has been starting to drive to create more value for the consumers. I don't want to repeat this again, but then just a few call outs here that one, like I mentioned, it's important to understand when to use blockchains and when not to use blockchain. If a simple read-write transactions are needed, you must evaluate whether you want to use blockchain or whether you want to use a simple database and then work through your solution. Like I said, you can edit a blockchain, but edit is a cumbersome and a costly, is an expensive proposition. So make sure that the technology, even though provides these capabilities, it's up to the implementation. How a particular how to implement this technology when you are building the solution. That's immutability. Decentralization is one of the key terms that we have been hearing since morning. Decentralized ledgers, etc. I thought from a beginner standpoint, these two can give a very simplistic way of understanding what is distributed and what is centralized. On the left-hand side, you will see the centralized way of doing things, which is, as we speak, today's world. The more we move forward, the more we look at use cases that start driving blockchain, you're going to see more of distributed ledger, which means the conventional way, which is today's way, is more towards a hub and spoke type of a network, right? A classic example that we can relate is, let's just say, the bus stops that we are. There is a central bus stand in every city that you will see, and there are different satellite bus stations that are there. Most of the times, these satellite bus stands, they often go to the central in one route or the other, and then from there they go to another station. That's pretty much controlling everything from the center. There are merits to it. There are not so good merits to it. You will see that when we see the blockchain implementations. However, the blockchain network is a peer-to-peer network. There is no way of central authority or anything like that. Each node has its own copy. So the best way to look at it is, if you see the right-hand side picture, it kind of tells you that one, there is no central way of controlling things. The green dots that you see, assume that these are the nodes, and each node has a copy of the same ledger, right? So it helps things move faster. It helps ensuring that the data that I own is available with someone else and it is in a trusted fashion. So hence, building more of that resilience into a blockchain helps build more authenticity into the applications that we develop. The encryption that I talked about, today's encryption or the way we secure, including tokenization that I talk about, is probably through certificates. In some cases, we may have used even tokens also through some sort of an API call and everything. In a similar way, blockchains, the core of blockchain technology is about encryption, right? And one of the things is, even though blockchain technology supports the standard encryptions that are out there, it also helps provide the capability to create custom encryption mechanisms. As a case in point, one of the platforms that we have developed in Virtusa use blockchain as a security layer, right? This is in the context of ensuring that in an IoT scenario, Internet of Things scenario, we must make sure that we do not end up adding some of the rogue devices into the system. Now, rogue devices, you can imagine that these are, in a simpler terms, you can assume that these are the disallowed devices that that are not, like I said, cannot be added into the system. So we wanted to make sure that this is avoided, and we used blockchain with custom encryption algorithms and everything to ensure that the devices are safe. So you will see all of these different implementations. The link is there. You can always go and then see who can view in public, who can view in private. There are various ways with which the visibility is controlled. Consensus is to ensure that there is only one version of the truth. Rather than derailing, it avoids ensuring that the records are not derailed or they are not forked from the chain. It drives consensus in that fashion. However, there are many ways with which the consensus are driven. Some of the things like proof of work. Very recently, there is a proof of stake concept, proof of elapsed time, proof of activity, proof of burn, and many more. Right? We will talk about that probably later. Types of blockchain is something that is an example. On the left-hand side, you're going to see databases. On the right-hand side, the DLT, all the way from permissioned to permissioned in a public and a shared fashion, permissioned and in a private fashion, permissionless are the three ways with which we can look at the types of blockchain. Some of the examples you can see: Hyperledger, Fabric, Corda, or some of the permissioned blockchains. The permissioned, public and the shared is where a lot of these government utility use cases come up. Like I talked about the Estonia's use case, the land registrations, etc., are all part of your government applications where a large group of people have to come together. So that's permissioned in a public way. Permissionless is all your Ethereum blockchains and so on and so forth. It also kind of works in a shared system as well, ensuring that those who have implemented Ethereum can start relating that. It's more about you not having to put a lot of keys and everything to ensure that the applications that you develop are developed in a way that one, while you drive consensus, while you drive trust, because at the same time you're driving these essentially to get a large set of participants who are now willing to approve a transaction, thereby the transactions are authentic. So that's how you end up doing Ethereum in Ethereum. The blockchain as a service is a concept that has been in the round for some time now. I'm not going to go into the details of that. You can see for yourself all the way from Hyperledger Fabric to Quorum. All of the cloud providers do provide blockchain as service on their cloud platforms. How the blockchain as a technology is important is the way with which the industry has also evolved. We keep hearing the industry 4.0 terminology. If you see the evolution started with mechanization till now connectivity. Connectivity in the sense that it is not about the internet or anything like that, but connectivity to ensure that there is an authenticity built and a trust that is built in the way with which we see the data. One of the key things that you will see is that we all related during the pandemic that there were supply chain issues, goods were not available. Most of us have gotten into trouble with, let's say, Big Basket or Flipkart or anything like that, which were taking a lot of time to service the customers, right? Now, what we have observed from an industry standpoint is blockchain as a technology, while it has matured itself, but it has also allowed itself to be a fundamental enabler to ensure that even in scenarios, God forbid, we may not hit another pandemic, but the more such technologies are used, the more powerful, and the way with which the entire ecosystem play happens kind of addresses the lot of gaps that exist today, right? A very simplistic architecture on the blockchain, all the way from the business layer, which we consume over web and mobile. Integration happens through the APIs, consensus mechanisms. Then there is a smart contract through the proxy layer. Then there is the infrastructure layers, which is private cloud, public cloud, on-premise, containers, Dockers, and all of that. I'll spend about 5 minutes in going through the use cases, and then I will open it up for questions. One of the key things that we all must remember, if you think of what, this is a famous quote from IBM chief Junioromity. He said that what internet did for communications, blockchain will do for trusted transactions. Now, what we are seeing is only the tip of the iceberg right now, right? The more implementation that we see, the benefits, that will automatically come out. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show you was a video. Give me 1 second, I will start this.
Hi, Raghuveer. Are you showing this video with some sound? You might want to reshare. We can't hear the sound.
Oh, you can't hear the video?
No, we can't.
You're not able to see the screen at all?
I can see the screen, but I can't hear the sound.
Okay.
So maybe you would want to reshare by on the bottom left, they should be saying can enable sound, and then we could see this again maybe.
Sure. So just give me 1 second. I'll reshare this, all right?
Yes, please.
Can you hear? Can you hear this? Okay, Amrita?
No, I'm sorry.
There is
No,
other
no, no worries. Maybe you can take us through the video any which way, and you can share the link with me. I'll share it in the chat section separately for everybody.
Sure, sure. So let's in that case, then let me just go back to the screen and then come back. Hold on. So what essentially this video is talking about is this is, by the way, the IBM implementation of blockchain in a use case where which describes how consumers now are thinking about the food that we consume, right? Which means until now, there has not been a technology which is so very authentic, which will tell us that where a particular food was grown, on what context it was grown, how well the food has traveled from its origin to your kitchen, maybe. There was no way with which technology would even tell us that. However, IBM has started pioneering using blockchain as the core technology enabler to provide that authentic information. In this video, what you are seeing is all the way from where the food was grown and food reaching the consumer and everything in between. It is enabling the consumers to know everything that has happened to the food journey there. So the use case that they talk about is how well do we know our food, right? And that's the core essence from a blockchain standpoint. Amrita, please confirm if you are able to see the screen. I've shifted to PowerPoint slide.
Yes, I can see the screen. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Now, I'm a big coffee freak, right? I have always, it has always pondered that, why can't I get the roasted coffee beans and somehow, I will ground it and then, I'll start getting the exact taste that I want. Very recently, I had been to a coffee estate as well, right? And one of the things, even the growers also said that, look, if you buy it from me, you have to take it to a roasting facility, and in the roasting facility, you don't know which one, you give a bag, they give you something else, you don't know the bag that you gave, you ended up with a different seeds, etc. Right? So, in a sense, to me today, there is no way of me figuring out that I went to a coffee estate A and I got the seeds from them, and I go to a roasting facility. I give the same back to them. Now, when they give me a bag back, I'm not sure if the seeds that I gave from this estate is the same thing that I've got. So there is no way of linking these, right? It is so much so that we are all today used to packaged food, right? We go to the supermarket, we get food. We have no idea, where what it has come. We just see through the advertisement. They say, oh, this tea is grown in, let's just say, Kannandevan hills. So for some reason, we end up believing that, and then we savor that. Now, the power of that decision making, along with ensuring that we know exactly what the food has went through, has to be enabled now. And this is the technology where the blockchain as a technology is going to enable that. What you saw on the IBM's use case is essentially around knowing your food. That's an important trend that is picking up worldwide. Simplest reason is most of us here are very, probably very cautious about whether it was organically grown, whether they had used some pesticides, what kind of land it comes from, so on and so forth, right? So, and like I said, packaging industry has kind of abstracted all these things. So the more these technologies come to play, the more information that we have and the better choices that we can make. In a similar way, this is another use case that I felt pertinent to all of us. Most of us, go to a point of sale, any merchant that we go, we use our credit cards, debit cards, whatever it is, and then we buy the item and then come away. However, for the merchants today, it takes about anywhere between 2 to 5 days for them to settle, right? Now, what happens, if the settlement has not done in the right way, it affects the overall business, right? Because some of these merchants, they rely on the cash. On some of them, they rely on an immediate money that they can tap into. Now, that's where the blockchain as a solution and a technology can play a vital role, whereby the entire payment gateway now having to start run on these blockchains, where banks become the nodes. So thereby, when a user makes a payment, the merchant's bank will send a request to the user's bank and the amount that is required, and there is an authentication that happens. If there is sufficient funds in the user's account, it gets immediately transferred to the merchant. If not, it goes through a different route. So such instant settlement helps a long way for the merchants. So we may not see this ourselves. Those who are merchants, they go through this every day. EHR, electronic health records, is another use case. Like I said, the digital platform that Government of India is now working on is being funneled or is being fueled by blockchain, is to ensure that all the records, including health records, financial records, taxation records, all of that are powered through blockchain. In this case, we're just really looking at one of those cases, which is towards giving the ownership of the health data, with which one patient can use their data for consultations. There's a lot of insurance play that happens on whenever there is an admission to a hospital and everything, ensuring that the insurers do not have to spend a lot of time and money in validating these, whereas a previously approved transaction or a record is already there. Thereby, it cuts across the time and the effort needed from an ecosystem to approve an insurance. Thereby, the patient gets through the process very seamlessly. Finally, I want to leave this with you and then open it up for the questions if there are. I did talk about Web 3.0 very briefly before. I thought having a high-level architectural understanding helps all of us if we are planning our career as a blockchain developer or a blockchain enthusiast, right? Web3 is all about decentralization, is all about being open and in a very trustless way. That's the three-part definition to Web 3.0, right? There are already efforts that are being made in this technology. However, like I said, any technology has to go through an adoption curve. I'm sure Web 3.0 will also go through that. The fundamental part of Web 3.0 is essentially the aspect of blockchain powering this entire Web3 framework. You will see decentralized finance. You will see identity and authentication mechanisms. Those who have used, you will be able to easily relate MetaMask. Of course, I have developed a few decentralized apps, or the D apps that they say, which use MetaMask as an identity and an authentication mechanism. There are NFTs there. OpenSea is one of the standard ways people start using. Thereby, when you come to the presentation layer, the good news is that JavaScript is not going to go away. So much of the JavaScript libraries that are there now have taken a form to support the decentralized application development. Ethers.js or Web3.js are the predominant JavaScript frameworks that are used. From an environment, one of these, I pretty much use Hardhat. So between Hardhat or Truffle are the ones that we can use. One of the key things in Web3 is also the way with which the files or the storage are managed. The most standard one that is being used is Interplanetary File System, IPFS, that's what they call. So is the standard one. Likewise, if you go to blockchain interaction layer, more about your data access layers, the APIs, the NFT APIs, so on and so forth. Lastly, the network layer, which binds it all together from the set of blockchain, whether it is Ethereum or Polygon or anything like that, till the non-EVM ones, which is Solana and other things. These are the technologies, these are the frameworks that help build or launch us into a successful Web3 development using blockchain as the technology. That's where I wanted to summarize. I'm sure we have about 3-5 minutes to go through the questions. Amrita, let me stop here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Raghuveer. It was really amazing hearing you. And I always knew blockchain was important, but the fact that it's such a foundational technology is, really come to the fore. Now I would just like, people have been asking questions in the chat, so I will request you to post them in Q&A, but we have 2 questions from Mahesh. Are there any limitations using blockchain technology? And if what are they?
Fantastic. In fact, I wanted to touch upon that, but a very astute observation on that. Today's limitation has been around performance. One of the key aspects that we look at implementing blockchain is the performance, the amount of time. When I say time, the compute time that is spent for record keeping, for validating transactions, for approving these transactions. That's one. Second, if I were to create an application out of blockchain, remember my slide where I talked about 3 things, right? Decentralized ledger, then the blockchain as a technology, and the application as a Bitcoin. If you extend that to cryptocurrencies, right? Today's in the mining world, the mining as a crypto mining world, it uses a lot of GPU power on the computers, right? And thereby it is not a very effective way of using blockchain in those scenarios. There are many strides that have come through, including Bitcoin miners, NFT miners, and all that require a different hardware and all that. So each one of them have a solution to it, but these are the 2 at the highest level, where you will see probably there is a still of work that is undergoing to ensure that the technology itself covers everything. That would be my response.
Thank you, Raghuveer. Another interesting question from Mahesh is, can you talk about some use case on education sector? I think what he means is in the edtech sector, or how it can be used in their sphere.
Absolutely. If you recall what I said, take an example of the Government of India initiative around digital platform powered by the blockchain as the core foundation. Anything that is required for a record keeping of the marks card or the progress that a student makes, number one. Number two, fast forward it to now, where the government has published or is publishing the new education policy, which allows students to move between courses, to move between institutions, to come, take a break, come back, all of that. It requires a lot of record keeping, and the way the government is thinking is to make sure that these are taken as your balance, the credit balance or the bank balance that you have. In a sense, this can be termed as the education balance that you have. Now, one of the ways with which we can implement this is an area where we think blockchain can come really handy, ensuring the movement is one taken care, which is kind of approved by institutions, approved by the participants in the network. Number one. Number two, the amount of information that is already there for someone to consume. For example, if I were to, let's just say, hire somebody and who has done only 1 year of something, how well I know that these are the credits that he or she has got, which is, if it is verified through a blockchain network, is something that I can safely consume. And these are the areas, Mahesh, where I think that blockchain will certainly revolutionize the edtech space. I didn't talk about the course curriculums, etc., all that. In an online world, you need to get more number of tutors and everything. How well you can approve these tutors, how well you can certify these courses that are there, how well you can certify these certifications that the users go through. So all of it can be thought of use cases that we can bake in using blockchain. Back to you, Amrita.
Thank you. Radhika is asking, can you please share any information related to implementation of inbound blockchain oracles?
Need more information on that question, Amrita.
That's it, but no worries. We have a next question, which I think you have already answered in part, is will blockchain dominate banking and governance? Obvious, the easy answer is yes, but how much will maybe you could explain?
I wouldn't say easy answer. I would say short answer is yes for that. Like I said, in my slides, you may have noticed one of the bits that I talked about is that blockchains today, we are seeing the implementation to be more on the currencies, the financial transactions, etc. Right? I think that will continue. That will continue for some time, as long as our thinking is that blockchain is used in terms of understanding that it is solving a problem of trust or solving a problem of transparency or anything like that. However, there are large banks who have launched using blockchain. They have launched their own coins also. For example, most of us may have read this on the newspaper. There is a JPM coin that JPMC has started. So they want to have a cryptocurrency based on that. Very short, a few weeks back, RBI also started piloting something with only retailers about digital currencies and so on and so forth. So something that space has to be watched, right? So how well those implementations are and how we are going to get affected out of that. So the short answer is yes, you are going to see a lot of these implications and the implementations in the banking sector. But that's the reason why, if you noticed the use cases that I shared, most of them were beyond banks or the regular banking scenarios as well. So there is enough and more potential for us to leverage this technology in many other industries as well. That's how I would like to look at it. Back to you, Amrita.
Yes, thank you. I have another very interesting question from Praveen. He's asking, if blockchain fully implemented, would we still need the banking system?
So banks will not going to go anywhere, right? Now, if banks were to go, who asked the question, Amrita? Sorry, I missed the name.
Praveen.
Praveen. So Praveen, if banks were to go away, then we'll be in trouble, Praveen, right? So I would not imagine that banks would go away. However, the way we transact today is definitely going to change, right? Now, like I said, any implementation has its own maturity curve. Today, those who are enthusiastically going on to the virtual world, for lack of a better term, let me put it as metaverse, and then going and then buying some costumes, playing some video games, etc., using NFTs and all that, right? So that's the currency that is an established currency there. However, these are all in the virtual world at the moment. So the way we are thinking today is, as long as I do not touch and feel a currency, that's not a currency for me, right? No matter how much ever I have. For example, I have my own Bitcoin mining application that I've developed for myself, right? It is actually running in my home on a small computer. It has fetched me, to be really honest with you, it has fetched me so far about $20, right? Now, what do I do with the $20, right? Where can I go buy? Can I go buy a physical artifact out of that? No, right? It had to be something in the virtual world. So, which means the entire ecosystem, which means retail, banks, all of these things that we interact, if they all come to a virtual, and then we also find a convenient way of transporting ourselves into a virtual world, where one fine day, let's just assume that we wear an Oculus Rift goggle starting of the day. We just wear it and sit in one place, and that's our world, right? We go to a coffee shop, we go elsewhere, we go to office, we go to some movie, all of that is all transacted through that. That virtual world is where you probably will not look to see a physical bank, but you will see a bank still available as a part of the virtual setup. That's how I wish to look at it, Ravi. So it's an interesting question though, but you're not going to get away with banks. That much I can say.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Raghuveer. We are overshot our time, and thank you for your patience. We have quite a few questions on how to start a career in blockchain. For that, I have shared the link for FutureSkills Prime, where you can explore and see there are quite a few courses which are paid and free. Thank you once again, and I hope all of you will be joining us again at 12 o'clock for our next session in another 15-20 minutes. It is on AI applications transforming the job market. I know all of us need to do about this one too. Thank you so much, Raghuveer, once again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.